The envelope was sitting on my windshield when I pulled into the resort parking lot. Not tucked under a wiper blade, placed, deliberately, centered on the glass like someone wanted to make sure I couldn't miss it. I thought it was a parking notice at first. I almost didn't open it. Inside was a single index card printed in my half-sister's handwriting, tight, looping letters that I'd known since I was 7 years old. It said, "Housekeeping has been instructed not to service room 215. We don't want the weekend ruined by uncomfortable energy. Room 215 was mine. I'd booked it myself 3 months ago, along with every other room in the east wing of Chateau Laurier Lakeview. All 11 of them. $42,000 on my personal visa, paid in full, because my stepmother had stood in my kitchen in February and said, with her hand on my arm and her eyes full of careful warmth, that my father's 65th birthday deserved something special, that the whole family should be together, that I was the only one who could make it happen. I was the only one who had the money to make it happen. That's what she meant. I stood in the parking lot for a long moment. The lake stretched out behind the resort, gray-green and flat under the June sky. A loon called somewhere out past the dock. I had driven 4 hours from Ottawa for this. I had taken Thursday and Friday off work. I had packed my good clothes, bought my father a first-edition copy of a book he'd mentioned wanting for 20 years, and driven 4 hours. I looked at the index card again, uncomfortable energy. I put it back in the envelope, put the envelope in my bag, and walked inside. Drop me a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I genuinely love knowing who's part of this community. The lobby smelled like cedar and lemon. The woman at the front desk, young, efficient, name tag reading Caitlin, smiled when I approached. "Checking in? I'm already checked in," I said. "My name is on the block reservation. Rooms 210 through 220 East Wing. I booked under the name Diane Ashford." She typed for a moment. "Of course. Is there anything I can help you with?" "Yes." I set my bag on the counter and kept my voice very even. "I need to know if any of my party have made modifications to the housekeeping instructions for any of the rooms." A pause. She looked at her screen, then back at me. "I can see there were some notes added to a few of the rooms this morning, but I'm not really sure I'm able to." "I'm the account holder," I said. "Everything on this block was charged to my card. I'm the sole client of record on this reservation." She typed again, more carefully this time. I could see the slight shift in her expression, the professional recalibration that happens when someone realizes the situation is more complicated than it first appeared. "It looks like someone called this morning and added a note to room 214 requesting no housekeeping services. There were also notes on 218 and 219 asking that those rooms be prioritized. 218 was my half-sister Natalie's room. 219 was her boyfriend's. Who made those calls?" I asked. "I'm not. I can only see that they were made this morning before noon." I nodded. "Thank you, Caitlin. I need to speak with your manager." "Let me back up, because you need to understand something before I keep going. I didn't get here by accident. I got here by being useful. My mother died when I was 11. My father remarried when I was 14. A woman named Susan who came with a daughter 3 years younger than me. A girl named Natalie who had her mother's eyes and her mother's talent for getting exactly what she wanted while appearing not to want anything at all. I don't think Susan is a bad person. I genuinely don't. But Susan loved her daughter the way some mothers love their daughters, completely, without corners, without the ability to see any shape that didn't flatter her. And my father, who grieved my mother for 3 years and came out the other side softer and more desperate to keep the peace than he'd ever been before, let that love expand until it filled every room in the house we all shared. I learned early that the way to take up space was to be useful. I paid for Natalie's college application fees when she was waitlisted at 3 schools, and my father said they were stretched thin. I co-signed her first apartment lease in Toronto when her credit wasn't established yet. I covered 2 months of her rent when she got laid off from a marketing job in 2021 and didn't tell anyone except me. I did all of this quietly without keeping a ledger because that's what you do for family. Or so I told myself. The truth, the one I didn't let myself look at directly for a very long time, was that I did it because I was afraid of what happened if I stopped. I was afraid that my father would look at me the way he looked at Natalie, with that uncomplicated warmth, and then look away because I hadn't earned it, because I was the other daughter, the one from the first marriage. So when Susan stood in my kitchen in February and said it with such gentle certainty, "You're the only one who can make it happen," I wrote the check before she finished the sentence. $42,000, 11 rooms at a lakeside resort in the Muskokas, Thursday to Sunday, catered welcome dinner Friday night, a chartered boat for Saturday afternoon, a private dining room for the birthday dinner Saturday evening, with a cake that cost more than my first car. I coordinated it all. I fielded the emails with the resort's event coordinator. I made the dietary restriction spreadsheet. I arranged the transportation from Toronto for the cousins who didn't drive. Susan said, "You're so organized, Diane. We don't know what we'd do without you." What she meant was, "You're so useful, Diane. We don't know who would pay for all of this without you." I drove 4 hours and I walked into that lobby and I found out my half-sister had called the resort to have my room marked as a problem. The manager's name was Philippe, and he was the kind of man who wore his professionalism like a good coat, tailored, well-maintained, impossible to wrinkle. He listened to me explain the situation without interrupting. "Ms. Ashford," he said when I finished, "I want to make sure I understand correctly. You are the account holder for the entire block reservation." "Yes. And you're saying another member of your party has been contacting the resort directly to make changes to room assignments and housekeeping instructions." "That's what your front desk staff told me." He looked at his screen for a moment. I watched his expression do the same thing Caitlin's had, the careful recalibration. "I can confirm that we received 2 calls this morning. One was from a woman who identified herself as the daughter of the guest of honor. She asked about the possibility of relocating one of the rooms to the West Wing. The West Wing was the overflow building, separate from the main lodge. A 5-minute walk from the dining room and the lake. Which room did she want relocated? He looked at me. He knew I already knew. 214, he said. I sat very still. "Philippe," I said, "I need you to pull up the contract signed when I made this reservation." He did. I leaned forward. "Can you read me the clause about unauthorized modifications to the reservation?" He read it. It said, in clear language, that only the account holder could authorize changes to rooms, services, or event bookings within the block. It said that unauthorized modifications could result in the cancellation of the reservation at the account holder's discretion, without penalty to the account holder. "I see," Philippe said quietly. "I want to be very clear with you," I said. "I have no intention of canceling this reservation. My father is turning 65 this weekend and I want him to have a beautiful birthday. What I need from you is a written record of those calls, confirmation that no changes were made as a result of them, and your assurance that going forward, any modifications to this reservation come through me and only me." "Of course," he said. He was already writing. "And I need one more thing." I reached into my bag and put the index card on his desk. "I found this on my windshield. I'd like it documented as well." He looked at it for a long moment. "Uncomfortable energy," he read. "Yes," I said. He looked up at me with the expression of a man who had seen a great many things in hospitality. "I'll make sure this is on file." I thanked him and walked back through the lobby to find my room. The welcome dinner was Friday night. 60 people in a private dining room with a fieldstone fireplace and candles in hurricane glasses, and my father at the head of a long table looking genuinely happy for the first time in months. That's the thing about my father. He is not a complicated man. He loves people gathered together. He loves good food and a glass of wine and the sound of his family talking over each other. Whatever else was true about the weekend, that part was real. I sat at the far end of the table and watched Natalie work the room. She's good at it. I'll say that without any meanness behind it. She is genuinely skilled at making people feel seen. She moved from group to group with her wine glass in her hand, laughing at the right moments, touching people's arms, drawing everyone toward her like she was the natural center of gravity. By the time the main course came out, half the table was looking at her instead of at my father. I sat at the far end and talked to my cousins from Sudbury, who are funny and unpretentious and who I genuinely like. I ate the duck confit I had personally selected from the caterer's menu after 3 rounds of back-and-forth emails. I drank 1 glass of Malbec and then switched to sparkling water because I wanted to stay sharp. Natalie came to me near the end of the night. She put her hand on my shoulder from behind the way she always does, a gesture that looks affectionate and is actually territorial. "Dad's having such a good time," she said. "Good," I said. "That's the point. You always do such an amazing job with logistics." She sat down in the empty chair beside me. Her smile was warm and bright and told me absolutely nothing. "Susan was just saying you should have been an event planner." Susan was saying that while I was paying for the event, I said pleasantly. Natalie's smile didn't move. "Someone has to keep track of the details." She sipped her wine. "I'm better with people. You're better with spreadsheets. We balance each other out." I looked at her for a moment. She met my eyes with complete composure. "Natalie," I said, "did you call the resort this morning?" A tiny pause. "I called to ask a few questions about the rooms, yeah. I just wanted to make sure everything was sorted." "They're sorted," I said. "I sorted them months ago." "Right, of course." She touched my arms. "You're so on top of everything. You know how I am. I like to check in." I smiled. She went back to the party. I stayed where I was, watching the fireplace. Saturday started beautifully. The boat charter was a success. 3 hours on the lake, sun on the water, my father standing at the bow with his face turned into the wind. My cousins jumped off the back of the boat and swam to a dock 100 meters away and swam back, laughing. Susan sat in the shade with her sun hat and her novel and looked peaceful. Natalie spent most of the boat trip on her phone. The trouble started around 4 in the afternoon when I went back to my room to shower and change before the birthday dinner. There was a note under my door. Not a printed card this time, a handwritten page. 3 paragraphs in Susan's careful cursive. It said that she and my father had been talking, and they thought it might be better if I joined the dinner a little later. After the family photos were taken, after the toast. The first part of the evenings was going to be very immediate family, and they wanted to keep it intimate, just for the first hour or so. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and read it twice, immediate family. I had been going to file it away. I had been going to take a breath, remind myself that my father was turning 65, and decide that this particular battle was not one worth fighting today. I had been going to do what I always do. Make myself smaller, be less visible, smooth it over, pay the cost of not mattering by accepting it quietly. Then I thought about the note on my windshield, and the call to the resort, and every lease I'd co-signed, every rent check I'd quietly transferred, every favor I'd done that nobody had ever thought to name because naming it would have required acknowledging that it was a favor. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, long enough that the light changed. Then I picked up my phone. The event coordinator's name was Michelle. I'd exchanged probably 40 emails with her over the past 3 months. She answered on the second ring. "Ms. Ashford, are you getting ready for tonight? We're so excited for the dinner." "Michelle," I said, "I need to ask you something. When I signed the event contract for the Saturday dinner, I was listed as the sole client of record, correct?" "Yes, that's right. And the contract specifies that all arrangements, seating, timing, access are at the client's discretion." "Yes." Her voice shifted slightly. She could hear something in mine. "Someone left a note in my room asking me not to attend the first hour of the dinner," I said. "I need you to know that I have not authorized any changes to the guest list or seating arrangement for this event. If anyone contacts you in the next hour to make changes, please confirm with me directly before making them." A pause. "Of course, Ms. Ashford. Is there anything I should be aware of?" I looked out the window at the lake. "I hope not," I said. "But just in case, the event is booked and paid under my name. If the account holder is denied entry to her own event, the contract is void and I'd need to discuss refund procedures." Understood, Michelle said, very carefully. I hung up, my hands were steady. I got dressed. I did my makeup. I wore the dark green dress I'd bought specifically for this weekend because it made me feel like a person who wasn't apologizing for anything. And then I walked into the private dining room at exactly the time I'd originally planned to, and I sat down in my seat at the table. The look on Susan's face when I walked in was something I'll carry with me for a long time. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was the expression of someone who had placed a bet and was watching it lose. Natalie recovered faster. She smiled, that same warm, unreadable smile, and said, "Diane, we were just about to send someone for you." "I'm right on time," I said. My father looked up from across the table and his whole face changed. "There she is," he said, with the uncomplicated warmth I had spent 30 years trying to earn. "We were wondering where you'd gotten to." "I was getting ready," I said. "Happy birthday, Dad." I sat down. The dinner began. It was a good dinner. The food was exactly what I'd chosen. The salmon, the roasted vegetables, the bread that came in warm cloth-lined baskets. The room looked the way I'd envisioned it. My father laughed a great deal. I talked to my aunts, who are loud and funny, and to my uncle, who always asks me about my work like he genuinely wants to know. At some point in the evening, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go. Then I thought about what I'd said to Michelle, and I answered, "Is this Diane Ashford?" "Yes. My name is Howard Chen." A brief pause. "I believe you know my son, or my son knows your family. I'm calling on his behalf. He asked me to reach out to you personally." I stepped away from the table. "I'm sorry, who is your son?" "Daniel Chen. He was meant to be attending your father's birthday dinner this weekend as Natalie's guest." I went very still. Daniel Chen was Natalie's boyfriend of 14 months, a man I'd met twice, briefly. His father, Howard Chen, was a name I knew from the business pages. A real estate developer, a significant one. "Mr. Chen," I said carefully, "what can I do for you?" "I'm calling," he said, "because my son just told me something that I found difficult to believe. He told me that a member of your family attempted to have another member of your family physically excluded from an event they'd personally paid for, at a venue where that person is the account holder." He stopped. He showed me a photograph of a note, and he found out about a second note, a card placed on a car. I said nothing. I was listening very hard. "Ms. Ashford," Howard Chen said, "I have been in business for 40 years. I know exactly what that kind of thing looks like and what it is. It's a power play. It's humiliation used as a management tool." "Yes," I said quietly. "I want you to know that my son is going to be having a very direct conversation with Natalie this evening about what he saw and what he thinks it means." Another pause. "He's a good boy. Sometimes it takes him a minute to understand what's in front of him. He understands now. I'm sorry to hear it came to that," I said. "Don't be." His voice was dry. "Better now than later. I also want you to know, because I think someone should say this to you plainly, that what you did this evening, walking into that room and sitting down, took more backbone than most people have. You didn't make a scene. You didn't involve the rest of the family. You used the tools available to you and you showed up with your head up." I leaned against the wall of the hallway and looked at the ceiling and breathed. "Thank you," I managed. "Take care of yourself, Ms. Ashford." The line clicked off. I stood in the hallway for a long moment. Through the door, I could hear the sound of my father's laugh, big and easy, rolling over the noise of the table. I could hear my aunt's voice going high at the punchline of a story. I put my phone in my pocket and went back inside. The cake came out at 9. My father cried a little, which he always does at things like this and always pretends he isn't doing. My cousin sang badly and loudly. I watched his face and tried to put everything else somewhere I didn't have to look at it. After dessert, when people were milling around with after-dinner drinks, Natalie appeared at my elbow. She didn't say anything for a moment. She was looking at the room. "Daniel left," she said finally. "I know." She turned to look at me. Up close, for the first time, the composure was gone. She looked like what she was, a person who had just lost something and was trying to figure out who to be angry at. "He said you talked to his father." "His father called me," I said. "I didn't reach out. He said you told them about the notes. He said his son told him about the notes." I corrected gently. I confirmed what happened. Yes. She stared at me. Why? I looked back at her. I thought about 20 years of being the useful one. I thought about $42,000. I thought about the index card, the word energy written in her handwriting across a piece of cardstock like it explained anything at all. Because I got tired, I said, of making myself smaller so you'd have more room. She didn't answer. She walked away. I let her go. The rest of the weekend was quiet in the particular way that things are quiet after something has shifted. Susan didn't speak to me directly. My father, who doesn't notice the things that aren't happening, remained cheerful and content. My cousins and I took a long walk along the lakeshore Sunday morning, and nobody said anything about any of it, and it was exactly what I needed. I helped coordinate the checkout logistics because I was still me and the reservation was still mine, and I'd rather do it right than watch it go sideways. I thanked Michelle and her team in person and tipped the housekeeping staff directly before I left. On my way out of the lobby, my phone buzzed, a text from an unsaved number. This is Howard Chen. I wanted to follow up. Daniel has ended things with Natalie. He wanted me to tell you directly, he said. And I'm quoting him, that anyone who plans a $40,000 birthday weekend for a family that's been treating them like a vendor deserves to know someone noticed. Take care. I sat in my car in the parking lot and read it 3 times. The lake was the same gray-green it had been Thursday afternoon. The loon was gone. The weekend was over. I had 4 hours of highway ahead of me and a job to go back to and a life that was in every meaningful way entirely my own. I thought about what my father had said. That first night when I walked in and he looked up from the table, there she is, with that uncomplicated warmth that I had spent so long trying to earn. I realized, sitting in the parking lot, that I'd been earning the wrong thing. I hadn't needed him to look at me like that because I'd paid for the weekend. He'd looked at me like that because I was his daughter, and I'd walked through the door. That was it. That was all it had ever been. I pulled out of the parking lot. The highway opened up ahead of me, flat and straight, cutting through the rock and the pines, and I drove north for a few minutes before I turned south for Ottawa, just to have the lake at my back and the road in front of me, and nothing in the way. Some things, when you finally put them down, turn out to be much lighter than you thought, and some things, when you stop paying for them, turn out not to cost anything at all.